So let's start our level 1 basics journey for Microsoft Excel. Now, before I open the app, I just want to say, in my opinion, Excel is one of the most important applications to learn and the least favorite for people to learn because they think about the fact that Excel is all math, it's formulas, it's functions. And the fact is we can do so much more with Excel, never having to do a formula or a function in the way of sorting data, presenting data, etc. So let's jump right in. You'll notice that I'm using the downloaded or Office 2021 version. I've downloaded it to my computer through my Office 365 account, and to open it, I'm going to just select the icon in my taskbar. Now, if you don't have an icon in your taskbar, you can come over your search. I'm on Windows 11. You can simply type Excel. It'll bring it up, and you can open it up. Now, from here, we're going to just do a basic blank workbook. So we're going to open up a workbook, and I'm going to make the cells a little bit bigger. So that's opening the app. Now, let's talk about and identify the components of the Microsoft Office ribbon as well as all of Excel. So as you can see up here, this is the Microsoft Office ribbon here. We have different tabs for home, insert, draw, page layout, etc. Through this video series, we'll be looking at all of these. Now on the home tab, you're going to find the most common features and functionalities that people use within Excel. Okay, so this can be the cut, copy, and paste, format painter, font, which means formatting the font within the cells. We'll talk about those in just a minute. How we align text within the cells, wrapping text, so having text go to multiple lines, merge and center, which we'll look at merging and centering, or just merging and left aligning, right aligning content. So we can merge cells to create a single cell. We have the ability to format data. If we drop this menu down, we can see that we can format it as general, a number, different currencies, accounting, short date, long date, as well as text. And sometimes we want to use text instead of a format, and we'll look at that as well. Standard formats, percentages, adding commas, increasing and decreasing decimal places. We have the ability to format data based on conditions. So this would be the top 10, the bottom 10, the top 33% color it this way, the middle 33% color it this way, the bottom color it that way. There are some default highlight rules that we can get into, and we will. We can also format our data as a table. This gives us the ability to better sort it, to get a better look and feel of the table. Headers don't become part of the data, so as we sort the data, we don't end up sorting the column and row headings into that. Different default formats of this, so a heading format, heading 2, 3, we'll again take a look at all this. Cells, how we can insert and delete rows, delete columns, and delete cells, as well as some different formatting in the way of height and width, which I'll show you a much easier way to do that. You'll also find the 5 most common functions here. Okay, the sum function, average, count, max, and min, and then there's many, many more functions that can also be accessed through the different formulas here. And again, we'll be taking a look at many of these tabs throughout this instructional video series. We have the ability to do some fills, clearing information from cells, sorting, finding, and then analyzing data. I'm going to go ahead and pause this while I put in some information, some data for us to look at and use as an example. So for our example here, as we learn to enter a simple function, I've created just a simple spreadsheet that, as you can see, it represents a fruit stand that sells 5 fruits. They sell more. These are the top 5 that they sell. And we're going to look at their sales throughout a typical week. So as you can see, we've got information in here. I just randomly entered the numbers that I want. There is a way to get random numbers. That's past this basic series. but we're going to look at entering a simple function. Now, as we enter a simple function that is going to add up these items here, I want to show you two ways to do functions. One, I like to refer to as static. Okay, so just to keep us on track here, I'm going to go static and I'm going to go dynamic. And we want to do formulas dynamically. So if there is a change in the data, okay, that it will automatically change. Now, one of the things we want to always make sure, and by default this is turned on, okay, is we want to go to the Formulas tab to calculate options and make sure it's on automatic. By being on automatic, it is going to recalculate as our data changes based on our formula. Now, let's start by looking at a static formula. If you're used to math, what you would do in math is you would just say 33 plus 21 plus 40, etc., equals something. Well, here we need to start by telling Excel that we are doing a formula and function, and we do that by starting with the equal sign. Now, you can actually come in here and say, all right, well, this row here, so these are rows, these are columns. The letters represent the address or the position of the column, and the numbers represent what row we are referring to. Okay. Now, if you'll notice here, that means that the value, let me stop that, the value in this cell is represented by the cell address B3. Another example would be here, 17 oranges for Tuesday is represented by the cell address C4. Now, back to our static real quick. What we would do is we would say equals 33 plus 21 plus 40 plus 30 plus 32 plus 28 plus 22. And in fact, doing it this way, we are going to get the correct value, okay, the correct result of summing the apples. Now, the problem with this is if we come in and change this value, let me just change Sunday by 1, I'll change it to 23. Watch what happens to my static formula. The value does not change. So even though I have it set to automatically update, it's not going to change. I'm going to take this back to 22. We'll look here in our formula bar and we can see that that's 22. So static is never a good idea for formulas. All right, so I'm going to go back to the Home tab here, and I'm just going to color this as red. Now, if static is not the way we want to do formulas and functions, how do we want to do them? And again, we'll go back to that cell address. Now, I'm going to show you a shortcut to this, but right now, we could simply say equals any value that's in B3 plus the value in C3, D3, E3, F3, G3, and H3. Now again, there's going to be a much more efficient way to do that I'll introduce in a later video. Actually, I'll introduce it right now just so you know it. But we could technically do a dynamic formula this way and get the same result. Now watch the difference between these two. First of all, let me go ahead and label this green. Green is good, so dynamic is good. Let me change that Sunday value again, and you'll notice why we want to use dynamic. It's because our dynamic formula is representing not the values, but the cell address, so that if the value changes, our formula changes dynamically. Now, to quickly jump ahead, we'll talk about this more. We are going to do the equal sum function. And the equal sum function, matter of fact, let me go ahead. I'm going to have to make this text so it'll keep what I exactly type in there. The equal sum function. We're going to do this again, but what we're going to do is we're going to say equals sum. We're going to do a left parenthesis. And then I'm going to left click and hold as I drag through the range that I want to add together. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a right parenthesis. And you'll see that that, in fact, gives us the same result. And as I change this, remember we started with 22. we went to 23, we adjusted our data. Both give us a dynamic means of adding up cells. So using what we just learned, let's go ahead and copy the contents of a cell to a range of cells using what's called the fill handle. So down here, I'm going to put in a function, the equals sum function, okay, that adds up the total fruit of our top 5 fruits sold on Monday. So you can see equals sum, left parenthesis B3, which is our first data point, through B7, which is our last data point, and hit enter. Now, so I don't have to type that all over again. And matter of fact, so we can see that this is, I'm going to format this using the standard total format, okay? So once I have this one, I want to make sure to audit it. I want to make sure it includes the range of cells that I want included in my total. If I double click on it again, I can see that range. I can see that, in fact, it includes the range. Now, from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that copy content with the fill handle. You'll notice that in the corner here, a little hard to see, but in the corner is a small block, and when I mouse over that, my cursor changes to a plus sign. I'm going to left click and hold as I drag over. And then, as you can see, it has taken that formula and drug it over, but you'll notice that it's doing that for the respective column that I want. Now, last thing I always want to do when I do a fill like this is audit the data. I'll go to any column I choose and make sure that it is representing both the column I expect it to as well as the data range that I expect it to, and it does. Okay. Now, applying cell styles. We have a lot of cell styles here. We've already done a few of these, but let's look at cell styles again. If you'll notice here, I've applied a cell style that is the heading 1 style. I can provide a heading 2 style. I could do a heading 4 style. Once I use the heading 4 style, okay, I would then get an additional heading style. I'm going to do heading 1 here. In these, I've applied the style of the heading 3. Here, I've applied no styles, but let's go ahead and stylize the names of our fruits, all right? So I'm going to stylize the name of our fruits. Let's go ahead and just use, notice I've got good, bad, and neutral. I've got some data styling here. So if I wanted to, indicate perhaps that these were calculations, I can use the calculation style and let my readers know that there's calculations done here. Now, of course, I can do the same thing here, with the sums and do the calculations. So just play with styles and you'll understand it, okay? Formatting cells in a worksheet. So here we don't have a lot of information. Let's go down here. Let me enter a couple items just for us to play with as it pertains to formatting cells. Now, when we talk about formatting cells, there's a lot of things we can do. First of all, these are numbers, so I might want to format them by right aligning them so that the ones column, the tens column, the hundreds and the thousands column line up. I definitely probably want to put a comma in there so that people can see that there are that space between thousands and hundreds. And since I'm not using any cents at all in here, I'm going to format this removing or decreasing the decimal place back to whole numbers. Now, I want to show you also in formatting, we have the ability to format using currency. And you'll notice currency puts the $sign right next to our value, okay? Now, I happen to prefer, it doesn't mean that currency is wrong, but I happen to prefer using the accounting. And the reason for that is if I widen this column, you can see that the indication of what type of currency this is separated from my value. It becomes easier to see. And because I've picked that style, okay, I'm going to have to then, again, reduce my decimal places, but it's still accounting. It's just whole number. Okay, so that's applying cell styles. I just would include that you need to go ahead and just practice these, figure out what styles work for you. Now, based on our chart here, we can create different pie charts, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a pie chart that represents just the apples sold, okay, for the entire week. So notice what I'm doing here. I'm going to left click and hold, and I need to select the same number of cells in each row and each column. So I'm including my heading, my column headings for the days. I'm including the type of fruit, which is the apple. I'm going to come up to insert here. I'm going to go to pie charts right here, insert a pie chart, and I like the 3D pie chart. So as you can see here, here's a pie chart that represents the number of apples sold for each day. Now, when doing a pie chart, I always like to come in here, right-click, and include data labels, okay, for a pie chart. So I'll do data labels here, and if you'll notice, it'll put on data labels for each one. Now, why aren't we seeing this one? Well, because it's not contrasting well. So I can double-click that one, highlight the value, come to the home, and change that font color. Maybe I change just that one. Maybe I want to change all of them to match, in which case I can select here, come up here, and change all of those as well. So there's creating a basic pie chart. Let's do one more pie chart real quick. And this one is going to represent a bunch of data. Now you'll notice what I didn't include in the pie chart are the totals. When we chart data, we're either going to do a chart or graph that represents the totals or a chart and graph that represents data. We don't want to include both, because what happens is then our chart and graph includes the data points twice, once as an independent data point and once as it's included in a total. So this is going to skew our data. And in the case of a column chart, it would give us all these columns and then these big, large columns at the end, right, that represent the data twice. So we don't want to do that. On this one, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to select, again, the same number of cells in the row and the column. So that's why I select this blank cell. You want to make sure you do that. And we're going to look at just Mondays. So again, we'll come into Insert. We're going to do a pie chart. We'll do a 3D pie chart. And this pie chart represents Monday sales. Let me type that again. Sales of top 5 fruits. Okay? So make sure that you give a title to your chart that describes it fully so that if I use just this chart and not the data, somebody can easily see what it represents. So we can see apples, oranges, etc. In a future video, we'll look at how we can change this color from an image that might represent the data being represented. So let's just take a quick step back in describing the Excel worksheet. We've already described the ribbon, that the Home tab has the most common features and functionalities that we would use here. Let me just scroll over this slowly so we can see this. So this is going to be our ribbon. It's what we can do with data. These are our columns. They're represented by letters. These are our rows. They're represented by numbers. And then each cell is given a cell address represented by the combination of its column letter and its row number. So the data in this cell is represented as B3. And again, we want to use those cells, not the static data in here, to create our formulas and functions so that they dynamically change as our data changes. That's pretty much the entire Excel workbook, if you will. A couple more things, though. You'll notice down here, a workbook can be a combination of a single sheet. So this sheet here, I'm going to call Top 5 Fruits. by days, okay? And I can create additional worksheets. Now, a workbook is a combination of worksheets that represent the same or similar data or data that can be grouped together, okay? That needs to say by days. There we go. So I can have many worksheets that comprise a workbook. Entering text and numbers. So, this is pretty easy. I already did this in my example, but notice I can just simply come in. I can enter text that represents the column headings just by clicking on the cell I want to put it in, typing what I need, and moving on. Now, in Excel, if I hit the Enter key, I move down. If I hit the Tab key, I move across so that I can enter my data. So one of the outcomes really to understand, and we already did this in entering a simple function where we talked about the difference between static, dynamic. We also looked at the sum function. The sum function is the function that we will use most likely in a lot of our spreadsheets, adding up multiple data points. So here we're going to start by doing equals sum. I'll do the left parenthesis, and then I will grab the range of cells. Now, this is most efficient. I can, however, do a sum function adding up the different cells. So I could say equals sum of B3, comma, C3, comma, D3, comma, E3, comma, but you can see how quickly that would become inefficient if we were adding up hundreds or thousands of cells that contain data. So we want to do the equals sum, left paren, the range of data we want to add, the right paren, and hit the Enter key, and now we have total for apples. Just a quick reminder of our fill. Once we have a formula here, we can left click down at the bottom right, that little green box there. I can left mouse over it. You'll notice my cursor changes. I left click and hold as I drag down. And because I drag down to this total, I'm also getting the grand total of all apples, oranges, bananas, tomatoes, and mangoes sold for the entire week. I'm going to grab this formula here, use the format painter, and format it so that we know that it is, in fact, a grand total. I also like to come in and provide a little thick outside border, different from the other borders that represent a grand total. And again, because this is data, currently I have it centered, I may want to right align this data so that people can differentiate between the ones, tens, and hundreds columns, okay, with my data. So I can do that as well. We already looked at how to change a worksheet name and a worksheet tab color. Well, we looked at changing a worksheet name. Let's add a worksheet name here. I'm just going to double click on this and say name of worksheet. Remember, this is a sheet within a workbook, okay? And I can also change the color by right-clicking. You notice I can rename it here. Many, many ways to do things. But here I have this. I can also change the color, maybe a color that associates with the data that I am presenting, okay? Colors also just help to give that contrast of the different worksheets so that people can see very quickly, oh, look, because it's not just white, I can see there's many worksheets, thus much data for me to look at. Let's look at changing document properties. I can come up to the file, to info, and these are the properties on the document. Now, we always want to fill these out because we're saving so many documents these days that we want to be able to search with our operating system the document properties to find information. Now, I'm going to show all properties here, okay? Size is yet to be filled out. That's going to be the size of the document. When I save it, reopen it, I'm going to see that in kilobytes, megabytes, whatever the case may be. The title, so for this document, again, I'm going to give it a descript title. So this is the top 5 fruits sold each day. okay, or within a week, okay? Tags, so tags are descriptors. So this is going to be fruit sales, okay, comma fruit, comma sales, comma weekly sales. So I can now search those. Any comments I want, maybe information on this, this could be used for multiple weeks. Just put in the new week's sales data. If I wanted to make a template out of it, I can. The status, so maybe I've done this and my boss has yet to approve it, so I'm going to mark it as draft. Okay, categories would be, might be fruits, it might be sales, it might be sales charts, so that I can then search by category. Again, the more you fill this out, the easier it's going to be for yourself and others in the future to find this document, especially if they don't know what the document name is, right? So the subject here might be sales, data. Any hyperlink bases, the company, right? We had the company, it was ABC Fruits. What did I call this company? Let's go back and take a look. ABC Fruit Stand. So I'll come back into File, I'll come into Info, I'll go to Company, and I'll change this to ABC Fruit Stand. Okay, this is going to give me data on the last time the spreadsheet or workbook was modified, who created it, the last time it was printed. You can see that I created it here, and then if anybody opens it up, manages it, modifies it, etc. So that's a detailed look at changing document properties. Let's go back to our data and look at how we might print this data. I'm going to go into File. I'm going to go into Print. And you'll notice that it wants to print to a PDF. Now here, I may want to modify my print orientation. Many times landscape works well because we have a lot of data left to right. Okay, so just come in, take a look at this. What do we want to print? Do we want to print active sheets? Do we want to print just a selection of data? So we would select a range of data before we came in to print it. So we could do that as well. We can print what size paper we're printing it on. Maybe I can narrow my margins. So, I can come in here and customize the margins and narrow the margins so that I can get more data. Let's see if we can't get our dynamic formula there. We've got our dynamic, now we've got our sum by narrowing our margins. So just come in, look at how you might print a document. We still will print a document, although we really try to present documents in their digital form so that we're not wasting resources in doing so. So we talked a little bit about the AutoCalculate. By coming in to our deal, we want to make sure that in formulas, in calculation options, that we have automatic on, because if we change it to manual, okay, and then watch what happens, we do 25, you'll notice that even my dynamic formula is not changing, okay? So we do want to make sure that we have this automatic on, that we're using automatic. Notice when we turn it on, it automatically, added up and keeps my totals dynamically correct because I didn't use the static data in creating my formula or function. So correct errors on a workbook, we'll look at that later. The biggest thing I can say about errors is anytime we create a formula or function, anytime we create a chart, we want to make sure it accurately represents the data we expect it to. So once I've done this total, I would go find another total once I've filled it over, like this one. I'm going to double click and I'm going to make sure that this formula is what I expect it to be for this column. Same thing over here. Let's go ahead and double click on this one. I'm going to make sure that this row, okay, is the same. And notice it's interesting that it puts this over part of my data, okay? But I can see that it does include H6. This kind of reminds me, hey, I really have to look at this. I can't just trust the graphical representation of the range, B6 through H6. And if I know, for example, if I look at this one here in I5 for bananas, the total for bananas all week, and I say, okay, what should this represent? It should represent equals sum, left parenthesis, B5 through H5. And then when I double click, if it does, now I know it's correct. Remember, a spreadsheet that has wrong formulas and wrong functions produces wrong business results, produces wrong business decisions. That's never a good thing. Audit your data, audit your data, audit your data, and your formulas and functions. Take care.